and squares all over Egypt, and yet the US government still persists on giving aid to this military that kills its own citizens. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have Dr. Zadidi from the Freedom and Justice Party. He's a former parliamentary member and part of the Foreign Relations Committee. Please welcome Dr. Zadidi.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the Egyptian Americans for Democracy and Human Rights and other organizations for inviting this. I would like also to thank the media for honoring the dream of Egyptians. The dream that the young Egyptians talked about is what I would like to share with you in these few minutes. The dream is a simple dream. The dream is to be able to have a decent life, is to be able to be free, is to be able to have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of organization. The dream is about social justice. The dream is also about Egyptian dignity that suffered tremendously during Mubarak's years. This is the dream. And when we think of what happened very recently, the dream is almost turning to a nightmare. And that's why Egyptians, as a representative of Egyptian people, as an elected parliamentarian, Egyptians will keep the dream going, and we will stay in the streets of Egypt peacefully. I underline peacefully. Even if we're attacked, and we're being attacked, we're being killed from now in many different times. But we will continue doing this peacefully until our dream has come true. The dream again is decent life, freedom, social justice, and Egyptian dignity. What happened? For decades, Egyptians suffered from external and internal tyranny, oppression, and dictatorship. The oppression through the police state, the corruption, the fear, and the monopoly. But all of us as Egyptians gathered a collective courage, and it was done peacefully on January 25th, the police day, to protest the police brutality and call for the whole system to come down. Not the whole system came down, only the head. And we as Egyptians went to a referendum, a roadmap in March of 2011, so that we decide what we need to do is we wanted to go the constitutional way so that we can finish the Egyptian revolution successfully and achieve the dream of all Egyptians. And I mean all Egyptians. We had about 8 times to stand in line for voting. We voted the parliament, the lower house, the upper house, twice for the presidency. There were many different candidates seriously running. First time ever we have a president of our own. For the past 7,000 years, the first elected president in Egypt is Dr. Mohammed Morsi. During the transition, we had all these, the dreams being realized in and out, and different types of election in and out. All what happened in January 30th, a conspiracy to end that dream, to turn it into a nightmare. TV channels were shut down. Hundreds of peaceful protesters were put in jail. Hundreds are killed for nothing but to say, we want democracy back, and thousands were wounded. My teacher was killed in these peaceful protesters. It is too much when my own army kill my own people. Suspending the constitution, removing the president, kidnapping the president, and by kidnapping the president, the coup kidnapped the majority of the Egyptian people. Finally, where do we go from here? Egyptians in millions, for the past 5 weeks, are in the streets and will continue to be in the streets. We will never recognize the coup. The coup is not part of Egyptian democracy, and that should be condemned by all civilized world. Not only the United States, the European Union, every other country. I thank special thanks to the African Union, to Nigeria, to Ethiopia, to Turkey for condemning this. The government, the coup government, should not be recognized and should not be dealt with. All massacres that are taking place as of we speaking now, in Fayoum, in another governorate, they were shooting at peaceful protesters. All these massacres should be condemned by the civilized world so that we together can build a better world, not only for Egyptians, but for everyone else. The pro-democracy, anti-coup movement insists on the following, that this is an Egyptian problem, and it has to be solved only by Egyptians, by Egyptian political parties. And the army has no place, according to the Egyptian constitution that was voted on by overwhelming majority. 64% of Egyptians went to the polls and accepted the constitution. The constitution states clearly that the army has no place in politics. The army protects the borders. Political parties settle their own differences democratically. And we also, call upon the international community, the friends of Egypt, if they want to help, they're welcome to help. But they need to be fair. They need to be honest brokers. You cannot fail to call a coup, or to assume that the army came to restore democracy and then you claim to be an honest broker. That is not accepted in the modern day. That's what we learned from the Great American Revolution. They used to say in the Great American Revolution, give me liberty or give me death. Nowadays, Egyptians are saying, il-mut wal al-mazalla. Egyptian will needs to be served, the Egyptian will needs to be respected, and this is the way, and we're going to do it together as Egyptians peacefully. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Dr. Dardery. Next up, we have Dr. Ahmed from the Minaret Freedom Institute. Minaret Freedom Institute is a Muslim libertarian think tank, and I will let Dr. Imad give you a little bit more information about it.
Thank you and good morning. Since I've been asked to say a little more about the Minaret Freedom Institute, I will say it's an Islamic think tank, a policy research institute here in Bethesda, Maryland. And its fourfold mission is to counter distortions about Islam, to show the origin of certain modern values that came out of Islamic civilization, to educate both Muslims and non-Muslims on the importance of liberty and free markets, and to advance the status of Muslims whether they live in the East or the West. I want to talk today specifically about American policy and international relations, since others here are much more knowledgeable about the internal situation in Egypt. If the United States wishes to retain its commitment to the principle of rule of law, it must apply Section 508 of the Foreign Assistance Act, which states unambiguously that the United States must cut aid to any country whose duly elected head of government is deposed by a military coup or decree. There can be no doubt that the action of the Egyptian armed forces that removed President Morsi was a military coup. This fact has been conceded even by critics of the Muslim Brotherhood, such as Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham. The alleged popularity of the coup is irrelevant to this determination. Using any such popularity as an excuse to ignore the law sends a bad message that not only will the United States tolerate scorn for the rule of law in countries where the concept is unpopular, but that the United States will ignore its own laws if they are unpopular abroad. People do have the right to disobey unjust laws when the harm that those laws do is egregious. But the Obama administration is not claiming that our law is unjust. If it did, it would try to repeal it. They are only claiming that losing American aid is unpopular with Egyptians. Claims that the enforcement of the law would constitute an endorsement of the Morsi regime are absurd. One can think a president has been a poor leader without justifying a military coup against him. The current president of France has made many mistakes, but no one calls for his replacement by a military coup. Obama's fiercest critics among the Republicans do not call for a military coup to displace him. Egyptian liberals have made a huge mistake in turning to the military to shortcut the democratic process for reform. The military is deeply embedded in both the Egyptian economy and the deep state, a term meaning the ruling elites as opposed to the formal rulers. and it is more interested in preserving its